The snow fell softly over Willow Creek, a quiet American town where every morning smelled of roasted coffee, fresh bread, and forgotten dreams. Inside a small corner bakery called Eleanor's Crumb, the first light of dawn poured through frosted glass, landing on a girl whose hands moved like poetry. Eleanor Hayes, 26, shy but radiant, was the kind of woman the world never truly noticed. Yet every loaf she baked seemed to carry a hidden heartbeat. Her apron was dusted with flour, her hair tied loosely, and her eyes, gentle yet distant, carried stories she never told anyone. She always said baking wasn't a business, it was a confession. Every cookie, every pastry, every sweet note of vanilla was a whisper from her heart. Outside, the town was slowly waking up. Street lamps dimmed. A bell chimed from St. Paul's Church. And from across the street, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom slowed down near her. Bakery. The car didn't belong here. Not in Willow Creek. It looked like a fallen piece of another world. A world of billion-dollar deals and diamond-tinted sorrow. The man who stepped out was Alexander Reed, 34, a name that echoed in every financial headline in New York. Billionaire. Visionary. CEO of Reed Enterprises. But today he wasn't a headline. He was just a man standing in front of a small bakery, breathing in the warmth he hadn't felt in years. He'd arrived hours early for a business brunch in town, or so he told himself. But, truthfully, he'd been unable to sleep since reading that small note from an old envelope that his late wife left behind. If you ever lose your way, go back to where warmth still exists. He didn't know what that meant until he saw that little bakery, golden light glowing through frosted glass. Something about it pulled him. When he entered, the bell above the door rang softly. Eleanor looked up, startled. Her eyes met his for the briefest second, and the air shifted. Alexander took a moment to steady himself. Something about the way she looked at him, not with curiosity or awe, but calm recognition, unsettled him. He ordered quietly, just whatever's warm. She smiled, shy but genuine. Then you'll have to wait for the cinnamon rolls. They're not ready to be loved yet. Loved? His voice cracked with quiet amusement. She blushed. I mean baked. Their laughter lingered between the sound of ovens and snow tapping against the window. For a few seconds, the billionaire forgot who he was, and the shy baker forgot who she wasn't. When Eleanor placed a steaming plate before him, she noticed his hands tremble slightly. They weren't the hands of a cold businessman. They were tired hands, haunted ones. She wanted to ask what weighed him down but didn't. Instead, she simply said, "People who eat in silence usually have too much noise in their heart." Alexander froze. His eyes flickered toward her, startled, because those were the exact words his wife had written in her final letter. As he left, she wrapped the leftover pastries in brown paper and handed them to him. "For your drive," she said softly. He took them, their fingers brushing, a silent spark between two broken worlds. Outside, he paused by his car. Snowflakes settled on his coat, melting like forgotten tears. He looked back once through the bakery's window and saw her standing there, smiling. Faintly, unaware she'd just awakened something he'd buried long ago. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. The aroma of cinnamon clung to his jacket, reminding him of warmth, of loss, of possibility. He didn't know it yet, but that shy baker had just changed his entire destiny. 2 weeks had passed since that snowy morning in Willow Creek. Eleanor had almost convinced herself it was just another customer, a quiet man who liked cinnamon and silence. But some nights, as she locked up the bakery, she'd glance at the door, half expecting to hear that bell again, half hoping she wouldn't. The world outside her window had already moved on, but something inside her hadn't. There was a pull she couldn't name. Every loaf she baked seemed to come out softer. Every song on the radio felt like it had been written for her. She didn't realize that far away, in a glass tower overlooking New York City, Alexander Reed hadn't forgotten either. In his office, city lights flickered across cold marble. He stared at a file on his desk, a proposal from a chain of investors to acquire several small-town bakeries for a new wellness cafe brand. Normally, he would have signed the deal without thinking. But tonight something made him pause. Eleanor's crumb was on that list. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. He could almost smell the cinnamon again. Feel the quiet in that bakery. The warmth that made him forget the weight of being Alexander. Read Billionaire CEO. His assistant, Mark, walked in. Sir, should I finalize the buyout? Alexander's gaze darkened slightly. No. Not yet. Mark blinked. But sir, it's just a small bakery and some. It's not just a bakery, Alexander interrupted, voice low final. It's the only place I've felt human in years. The next morning, a black Rolls-Royce rolled once more into Willow Creek. Eleanor was kneading dough when she saw the reflection of headlights flicker across the window. Her breath caught. The bell chimed. And when she looked up, there he was. The same man. The same calm eyes, but this time something different. Determined. He wasn't dressed in his suit. No power. No arrogance. Just a man in a wool coat, holding something behind his back. I wasn't sure if you'd still remember me, he said quietly. Eleanor smiled, trying to hide the sudden rush of warmth in her chest. It's not easy to forget. Someone who orders whatever swarm. He laughed softly, the kind of laugh that sounded like it hadn't existed in his world for years. Then he held out a small white box. Inside, perfectly wrapped, was a slice of her own cake. I bought it from your shop last time, he said. I tried to bake it myself. It didn't end well. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. You bake now? I tried. Thought maybe I could feel what you do when you make something. He paused, then added with a faint smile. Turns out I'm better at breaking things than baking them. Something in his tone, that fragile honesty, made her heart ache. They sat together at the small wooden table by the window. Outside, children played in the snow. Inside, for the first time, Alexander Reed looked like a man who wanted to stop running. Why a bakery? He asked her quietly. Eleanor thought for a moment, then said, because bread doesn't judge. It rises even when it's been beaten down. He went silent. The line hit him harder than she knew. Then gently he asked, and you? Do you rise too, Eleanor Hayes? She looked down at her flour-covered hands. Some days, she whispered. Some days I just try to remember how. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Only the ticking clock. Only the snow outside. Only two broken hearts learning how to breathe again. When Alexander left that afternoon, he didn't take the rolls. He walked down the quiet street, past children throwing snowballs, past the small-town simplicity he'd never known he needed. And as he walked, he realized something terrifying. For the first time since his wife's death, he didn't want to go back to his tower. When the past find its way back into their lives, one secret will test the fragile connection they have just begun to build. The winter sun rose slow and golden over Willow Creek, painting the bakery windows in soft amber light. Eleanor was humming quietly as she set the day's first tray of muffins near the counter. Her hands moved gracefully, but her mind wasn't in the dough. It was still replaying fragments of yesterday, the billionaire's quiet laugh, his eyes when he said he felt human again. She caught herself smiling, then quickly looked away. Don't be ridiculous, she whispered to herself. He's not coming back. But her heart, traitorous, hopeful, didn't listen. At that same moment, Alexander Reed stood inside his penthouse office high above Manhattan. The skyline stretched endless before him, glass and steel cutting through morning mist. But his attention wasn't on the city. On his desk lay an old envelope, yellowed with time. His late wife Clara had sealed it with a photo inside, one he'd never dared to open until now. When he finally slid the photograph out, his breath caught. It wasn't a picture of him and Clara. It was a photo of Eleanor's bakery, taken years ago. He turned it over. On the back, written in Clara's delicate handwriting, were the words, "Warmth can hide where you least expect it. If you find her, don't let her go." His pulse raced. If you find her. Had Clara somehow known Eleanor? Or was this a coincidence wrapped in destiny? Either way, Alexander knew what he had to do. By noon, the bell above Eleanor's door chimed again. She turned, and there he was. Same wool coat, same quiet storm in his eyes. Only this time he wasn't smiling. He walked straight up to her, pulling something from his coat pocket, the photograph. "Do you know this place?" he asked softly. Eleanor froze. "That's my bakery," she said, confused. He nodded. "This picture belonged to my wife." Her heart skipped. "She passed away 4 years ago. But I just found this, with her handwriting on the back." He handed it to her, and she traced her fingers over the image. Her bakery before it was. Even hers. "This was taken before I bought it," she murmured. "Back when it belonged to Mrs. Caldwell." Alexander looked at her carefully. "Did you ever meet her?" "No," Eleanor said, still staring at the photo. "But Mrs. Caldwell once told me she sold this place to me because a woman, a stranger, walked in one day, looked around and said, 'Someone's heart belongs here.' She left right after. Never gave her name." Their eyes met. Neither spoke, but the air thickened. 2 pieces of a puzzle slowly snapping into place. A silence followed, gentle but heavy. Eleanor finally looked up and asked, "Do you think your wife was that woman?" Alexander exhaled. "I don't know. But if she was, maybe she was trying to lead me here." She smiled faintly. "To a bakery in the middle of nowhere?" He smiled back. "To a place where things still rise after being broken." The line hung between them. The same warmth as before, but deeper now, like something sacred. That evening after closing, Eleanor sat alone at one of the tables. She placed the photograph on the counter, lit only by the golden glow of the hanging lights. For a long time, she stared at it, wondering if fate really worked like this, messy, unpredictable, but somehow perfectly timed. Outside, the snow began to fall again. And across town, Alexander stood at his hotel window, looking at that same sky. He whispered into the silence, "Clara, if this is you, thank you." A forgotten journal inside the bakery reveals truths that connect their lives deeper than either imagined, and forces Eleanor to confront the one secret she's never told anyone. It was a quiet Sunday in Willow Creek, the kind of day when snow muffles every sound, and the world feels paused between breaths. Eleanor arrived early at her bakery, her boots crunching softly on the icy ground. The air smelled of cinnamon, coffee, and memories that refused to fade. But today wasn't just another morning. She couldn't stop thinking about that photograph. About his wife. About the strange, unspoken connection that tied their worlds together like threads of fate. As she unlocked the door and stepped inside, she noticed something unusual, a loose floorboard near the counter, slightly raised. It must have shifted overnight with the cold. Curious, she crouched down, prying it open carefully. Beneath it lay a small tin box covered in flour dust. Her heart quickened. She'd never seen it before. When she opened it, inside was an old leather journal, its cover soft and worn, pages yellowed by time. The first page carried a single name, Clara Reed. Eleanor froze. The same name the billionaire had whispered with that mix of sorrow and reverence. Hands trembling, she turned the pages. The handwriting was graceful, poetic, emotional, alive. It wasn't just a journal. It was a collection of thoughts, confessions, and fragments of a heart that had once lived inside her. Bakery walls. I come here when I need to remember what warmth feels like. The woman who owns this place doesn't know me, but somehow, her bread tastes like healing. Eleanor's chest tightened. Mrs. Caldwell. It must have been her bakery then. She turned another page. There's a man I love who's forgotten how to love. He doesn't mean to be cruel. He's just drowning in his own silence. One day, if I'm gone, I hope he finds this place. I hope he meets someone who reminds him of what kindness tastes like. Eleanor's eyes filled. Every word pulsed with quiet pain. The kind that only someone truly in love could write. She knew what she had to do. By evening, she stood again in front of the same Rolls-Royce parked under the falling snow. Alexander stepped out, startled to see her there. Eleanor. She held out the leather journal. This was hidden under the bakery floorboards, she said. Softly. It's hers. He took it, his expression unreadable. For a long time he said nothing. Just brushed his fingers over the familiar handwriting. Then his voice broke. I didn't even know she'd ever been here. Eleanor looked at him, eyes gentle. She wrote that she hoped you'd find this place. That, maybe through it, you'd find warmth again. He smiled faintly through the ache. And I did. Their eyes met. For a second everything else, the snow, the grief, the past, disappeared. Only two souls remained, bound by someone who'd loved them both in different lifetimes. Later that night, Alexander sat alone in his hotel room, reading Clara's words under the soft glow of a bedside lamp. If he ever finds you, tell him forgiveness isn't a destination. It's a choice we keep making every morning. Tears slipped down his face, quiet cleansing. For the first time in 4 years, the silence in his heart cracked open. Outside, snowflakes drifted like whispered blessings from the heavens. Inside, Eleanor's bakery lights still glowed, the same soft warmth that had guided him here in the first place. And somewhere between grief and grace, destiny had just taken its next breath. When Alexander invites Eleanor to New York to discuss a business proposal that could change her life, she must decide whether to protect her heart or risk it again for a man who's still haunted by love lost. The invitation came wrapped in simplicity. Ivory envelope, golden wax seal, no flourish, no company letterhead. Just 5 words written in clean handwriting. Come to New York, Eleanor. For 2 days, she kept staring at it between baking batches. Her heart said go. Her mind said don't. But when she remembered the look in Alexander's eyes as he held his late wife's journal, the quiet ache behind his calm, she knew she couldn't ignore it. So that Friday morning, the shy baker from Willow Creek boarded a train headed for New York City, a city that sparkled like ambition and broke hearts with equal ease. The world outside blurred into silver streaks of snow as she traveled. In her hands was the same brown paper bag she'd given him on their first meeting, this time holding a single loaf of fresh bread, a quiet reminder of where they began. When she arrived, the driver guided her to a towering glass skyscraper read, and the kind of building that made even the sky look small. Inside, the air smelled of steel and success. Men in suits, women in heels, everything moving like a perfect rhythm, except her heartbeat, which felt utterly out of sync. She followed the assistant to the top floor. The elevator opened to reveal a panoramic view of Manhattan, glowing golden under the winter sun. And there he was, Alexander Reed, in a charcoal suit, standing by the window, looking like the world's weight was balanced on his shoulders. When he turned, his eyes softened immediately. You came, he said, his voice low, almost relieved. You invited, she replied, managing a small smile. He gestured toward a table set near the window, not with documents or contracts, but with pastries. Her pastries. I had them flown in this morning, he said. The team has been talking about nothing else since they tried them. She blinked, stunned. You brought my bakery to New York? He smiled faintly. In a way. Then he placed a folder in front of her. Inside were sketches, elegant, minimal, yet warm. A new cafe concept called Crumb and Soul. I want to open a chain, he said softly. Not for profit. For meaning. A place where people can breathe again, the way I did when I walked into your bakery. Eleanor's breath caught. You want me to run it? I want you to lead it, he corrected. You'll have full creative control. Recipes. Design. Atmosphere. Everything. Her eyes widened. Alexander, this is an opportunity, he finished. Or maybe a redemption. For both of us. For a while, silence filled the space between them, thick with unspoken feeling. Finally she whispered, Why me? He looked straight at her. Because you make people feel seen, Eleanor. And because for the first time in years, when I'm around you, I don't feel like a man who lost everything. I feel like someone who could start again. Her throat tightened. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. The sincerity in his voice, raw, unguarded, melted every wall she'd built. Still, something deep inside her trembled. She wasn't used to being seen this way. Not after all the years of loneliness. She looked out at the skyline, whispering, I'm scared of what this could mean. He stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough for her to feel his warmth. So am I, he said quietly. But I'm more afraid of what it means if we never try. That evening, as Eleanor's cab drove away from the glass tower, she clutched the folder against her chest. Outside, New York lights shimmered like stars trapped on Earth. She didn't know what scared her more, the idea of saying yes to his offer, or what her heart already whispered whenever he was near. In that moment, beneath the glittering skyline, the shy baker realized something terrifying. She hadn't just come to New York for a business proposal. She'd come for the beginning of something she couldn't stop, even if she wanted to. As the project begins, chemistry turns to conflict when Eleanor learns the investors want to change her bakery's soul. And Alexander must choose between protecting her dream or protecting his empire. The grand launch of Crumb & Soul began like a dream. A Manhattan studio transformed into a world of warmth. Golden lights, rustic wood, scent of fresh pastries woven with jazz and candlelight. It wasn't corporate. It was alive. Eleanor stood near the counter, wearing her simple white apron amid a sea of suits. Her eyes danced across the room. The laughter, the cameras, the people tasting her creations. This was supposed to be her world finally expanding beyond Willow Creek. And yet something didn't feel right. Across the room, Alexander spoke with the board. His face calm, his posture composed. But Eleanor could see the tension in his eyes. Moments later, his assistant Mark approached her. Miss Hayes, the investors want to see you upstairs. She nodded and followed him into a conference room filled with sharp eyes and colder smiles. A woman in a sleek black dress, Victoria Hale, head investor, looked her over. Eleanor, your bakery is charming. But for Manhattan, we'll need to elevate it. Sleek. Modern, less emotional. Less emotional? Eleanor repeated softly. Victoria Ismail. We'll replace the handwritten notes on your packaging with printed logos. And perhaps, tone down the vintage warmth. Think luxury minimalism. Eleanor's heart sank. That warmth is the soul, she said gently. It's what people feel when they step in. Victoria's smile didn't waver. People don't feel, dear. They buy. Before Eleanor could respond, the door opened. Alexander entered, calm but radiating. Quiet power. His gaze shifted from Victoria to Eleanor. What's happening here? Just business adjustments, Victoria said coolly. We're refining the brand identity. She's new to corporate scale. Alexander's jaw clenched. Her vision is the identity. Victoria crossed her arms. You brought her here to inspire people. Don't let sentiment cost us millions. The silence was sharp. Every eye turned to Alexander. He looked at Eleanor, her hands folded tightly in front of her, eyes trembling with uncertainty, but defiance. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke soft but firm. If keeping the soul costs millions, we'll pay it. Later that night, after the crowd had gone and the city had quieted, Eleanor stood alone in the kitchen of the flagship café. Flour dusted her hands again, her comfort, her armor. When Alexander walked in, she didn't turn immediately. You shouldn't have done that, she murmured. He frowned. Done what? Challenge them for me. Those people are your world. You can't afford to look weak because of someone like me. He stepped closer. Someone like you? Her voice cracked. I'm just a baker, Alexander. You're a man who runs empires. People like me don't belong in places like this. He exhaled slowly, his tone low and steady. Then maybe I'm tired of places like this. Maybe I'd rather belong where you are. Eleanor finally turned. The air between them was thick, flour swirling like soft snow around. Their faces, their eyes met, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath, the quiet ache behind his composure. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Neither do I, he admitted. But for once, I don't want to run from it. A beat of silence. A heartbeat too long. Then the oven timer rang, a sharp, grounding sound that pulled them back to earth. She laughed softly through the tension. Your timing's terrible. He smiled, the kind that carried 1,000 unspoken things. It always has been. As he left the cafe, snow began to fall again, blanketing the city in quiet silver. Through the glass, he looked back one last time. At the woman covered in flower framed by golden light. He realized something dangerous. He wasn't protecting her dream anymore. He was falling into it. When the cafe's success draws media attention, the world starts prying into Eleanor's past. And the secret she's buried for years threatens to destroy everything they've built. The story of Crumb and Soul spread like wildfire. Articles called it the warmest cafe in Manhattan. Photos of Eleanor's handwritten messages, "You matter. You are loved," went viral. Customers lined up around the block just to feel something real again. For Alexander, it was the first business that didn't just make money, it made him feel alive. But success has a way of pulling ghosts into the light. One morning, Eleanor arrived early to open the cafe. As she unlocked the door, a flash from a camera caught her off guard. A man stepped forward, slick hair, press badge glinting. "Miss Hayes? The Herald is doing a story about your sudden rise. Care to comment on how a small-town baker went from debt to partnering with Alexander Knight?" Eleanor froze. I'm not sure He interrupted. "Or maybe you'd like to talk about your past in Willow Creek. About why you left your fiancé days before the wedding." Her blood ran cold. "How do you?" He smirked. "People talk, Miss Hayes. The internet listens." By the time Alexander arrived, she was in the back room, trembling, trying to compose herself. He found her sitting on a stool, clutching her apron. "What happened?" he asked, voice calm but urgent. She shook her head. "It's nothing. Just a reporter." "Eleanor." His tone deepened, protective, almost desperate. "Tell me." She exhaled, eyes glassy. "There was someone back home. We were supposed to get married. He was charming, kind, until he wasn't. He controlled everything, how I dressed, who I spoke to. The bakery was my escape. When I finally left him, he told everyone I'd ruined his life. I moved here because I couldn't breathe there anymore." Alexander's expression hardened, not with judgment, but fury at what she'd endured. "You don't owe anyone an explanation," he said quietly, "least of all the press." But it wasn't that simple. By evening, headlines were already spinning the story. Small-town runaway or gold digger. Who really is Eleanor Hayes? Social media was brutal. Comments flooded in, strangers dissecting her life like entertainment. She avoided calls, interviews, even the cafe. The woman who once baked to heal others couldn't face the world anymore. Late that night, Alexander found her in her apartment. Lights dim, her hands shaking as she deleted messages. He knelt beside her chair. "Eleanor, look at me." She didn't. "They're right, Alex. I don't belong here. I've tainted your name, your company." He interrupted sharply. "Stop." He took her hand, firm, grounding. "I built empires from steel and silence. You built something stronger, warmth. You think that's weakness." She finally looked at him, eyes red. "I think it's dangerous." "Then let it be dangerous," he whispered. "Because I'm not losing the one person who reminds me I still have a soul." The next morning, without telling anyone, Alexander called a press conference. Dozens of cameras flashed as he stood before them. Every inch the billionaire CEO, but with a quiet storm behind his eyes. "You want a story?" he said. "Here it is. Eleanor Hayes built Crumb and Soul from pain, not privilege. Her strength is why this company exists. Anyone who questions that questions me." The room fell silent. The clip went viral within hours. The internet turned, the hate drowned by a wave of support. That night, Eleanor stood outside the cafe watching the lights glow through the glass. When Alexander joined her, she didn't speak, she just leaned lightly against him. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was hiding anymore. But peace never lasts. As the cafe expands, Alexander's ruthless investors set a trap, one that forces him to choose between Eleanor's heart or his empire. Winter melted into spring, but in Alexander's world, warmth never lasted long. The cafe was expanding fast, new branches in Chicago, Boston, Seattle. Crumb and Soul was now more than a name, it was a movement. Eleanor wanted every branch to feel like home. Handwritten notes, small-town warmth, bread baked with emotion. But his investors wanted efficiency, margins, automation. And behind their polite smiles, they wanted control. It started in a board meeting. Alexander sat at the head of the table, sharp suit, jaw tight, eyes colder than glass. Eleanor sat beside him, feeling slightly out of place among the executives. A man in his 50s leaned forward. We've been analyzing the cost of her handwritten cards. And the extra hours of custom baking. It's inefficient night. This isn't charity, it's business. Eleanor's hands tightened under the table. Another voice chimed in. We should streamline. Replace handmade touches with digital ones. Keep her as the face, but control the rest. It's better branding. Alexander didn't answer immediately. He could feel Eleanor's eyes on him, waiting for him to say something, to choose. Gentlemen, he finally said, voice slow and measured. Crumb and Soul wasn't built from efficiency. It was built from humanity. The investors exchanged glances. And humanity doesn't scale, Alex. Not if you want to hit a billion-dollar valuation. A dangerous silence filled the room. That night, in his penthouse overlooking Manhattan, Alexander stood by the window, city lights flickering below like broken constellations. Eleanor arrived quietly, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. You didn't say much in the meeting, she said softly. He turned toward her, eyes distant. They're threatening to pull funding if I don't replace you as head of creative direction. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. You're saying they want me gone? They're saying you're too emotional, too human. She smiled sadly. They're not wrong. Don't do that. His voice sharpened. Don't make it sound like you're the problem. I'm not, she said. But you can't fight everyone for me. This is your empire, Alex. Don't burn it down because of me. He moved closer, his words a growl of conviction. You think I built all this just to lose my soul again? 2 days later, the decision came. The investors called for an emergency meeting. Eleanor wasn't invited. Alexander walked in knowing what he was about to do. He listened to every accusation. That she was a distraction, a liability, a sentimental weakness. And when they finished, he stood, buttoning his jacket with quiet authority. You're right, he said. She is emotional. That's why people love our brand. That's why. You're making money. But if you can't see that, you're fired. The room erupted in disbelief. You can't. I just did, he said coldly. I don't run a company that kills what it stands for. That night, Eleanor found him alone in the café, sleeves rolled up, flour dusting his expensive watch. He was baking. Lost a few billion today, he said with a crooked smile. She stood beside him, wordless, then took his hand and guided it back to the dough. You'll earn it back, she whispered. This time with purpose. For a long moment, they just worked in silence, kneading pain into peace, ambition into warmth. When the timer dinged, the scent filled the air, the same smell that had once brought him to his knees in Willow Creek. He looked at her, voice low, raw. I'd burn every empire if it meant keeping this. She smiled, tears in her eyes. Then let's build one that doesn't need fire to stand. Outside, the city glowed, alive, defiant, reborn. Inside, 2 souls stood at the edge of power and love, ready to rewrite the rules. But just when they think peace has returned, an unexpected visitor from Eleanor's past walks into the café, carrying secrets that could shatter everything they've built. Spring rain washed over Manhattan, turning the city's glow into rivers of light. Crumb and Soul was packed, laughter, coffee steam, soft jazz humming through the air. For the first time in months, everything felt still, safe. Eleanor stood behind the counter, dusting sugar over warm pastries, when the bell above the door chimed. She didn't look up at first. Then a voice, low, familiar, wrong, cut through the noise. Ellie. The sugar slipped from her hand. Her world went silent. Standing at the entrance, soaked in rain, was Noah Hale, the man she once promised forever to. Time bent. The room spun. Customers blurred into background shadows. Hello, Eleanor, he said softly, stepping closer. His smile hadn't changed. Polite, practiced. Poisoned. You disappeared. Didn't even leave a note. Alexander, across the cafe, looked up from his laptop. The moment their eyes met, he felt it. Danger cloaked in familiarity. Noah's gaze flicked toward him. So this is where you ended up. Trading rings for recipes. And him, the billionaire savior. Eleanor's voice trembled. You shouldn't be here. Oh, but I had to see you, Noah replied. The internet made you a hero. Small-town baker. Saves billionaire's soul. Cute headline. Thought I'd remind everyone who you really are. He pulled a folded envelope from his coat. These are photos, letters, proof that you left me. With debt and lies. One call, and this place burns. Alexander rose slowly. The cafe quieted as if the walls themselves held their breath. Put that away, he said, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Noah smirked. Or what? You'll buy me off? Money can't erase the truth. Alexander stepped closer, eyes locked on him. You don't have truth. You have resentment. For a second, it looked like Noah might swing. But Eleanor stepped between them, small, trembling, unshakable. Stop, she said, voice clear now. Noah, you don't get to control me anymore. I left because you broke something that love shouldn't break, safety. The cafe was utterly silent. Rain beat against the glass. You told me I'd be nothing without you, she continued, tears shimmering but steady. Look. Around. I found myself. Noah stared at her, the defiance, the strength he never could cage, and for the first time his confidence cracked. He dropped the envelope on a nearby table. You think this is over? It already is, Alexander said coldly. Leave before I make sure every investor in this city knows exactly who you are. Noah hesitated, then turned and walked out into the rain, shrinking into the storm that had always followed him. Eleanor exhaled, shaking. Alexander caught her as her knees buckled. It's over, he whispered. But her voice broke. No, Alex. It's never over with people like him. He won't stop until he takes something from us. He brushed a tear from her cheek. Then we make sure there's nothing left for him to take. Because everything that matters, we protect together. That night, she found the envelope on the table. Inside weren't threats, just fragments of their past. Her old engagement photo, a letter never sent, a recipe written in her own handwriting. For the man I once loved. She burned it in the cafe's oven, watching the flames dance and die. Outside, thunder rolled over the city. Not a warning but a promise. Alexander wrapped his arms around her from behind, whispering, whatever comes next, we face it. Not as partners. As one. And as the firelight flickered across their faces, both knew it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a war between the love they'd built and the world that wanted to break it. When Noah returns with an offer that could destroy their empire or save it, Eleanor and Alexander must make one final choice, between forgiveness or forever. Rain fell hard over Manhattan that night. The streets shimmered like glass, but inside crumb and soul, the air was heavy, thick with silence and something unspoken. Eleanor wiped down the counter when the door opened. Alexander stood there, soaked. Eyes hollow. He set a folded paper on the table. Noah came to me. Her pulse stopped. He found old debts from your bakery in Willow Creek, Alexander said quietly. He can use them to claim this place legally, unless I give him what he wants. What does he want? Half my company, he said, voice rough. Night Industries. Everything I built. She stared at him, disbelief cracking her voice. You can't do that. He stepped closer. If it keeps you safe, maybe I can. Alex, she whispered. Safety built on surrender isn't safety. It's chains. The cafe went still, the rain whispering against the glass. You once told me forgiveness is a choice, she said. Then forgive yourself for thinking you have to save everyone alone. He looked at her, the woman who had taught him how to feel again, and for the first time he didn't know how to fight without losing something. So she chose for both of them. Eleanor grabbed the paper, tore it in half, and threw it into the Trash. I didn't survive him just to lose myself now, she said. Let him come. 2 days later, Noah did. With lawyers, cameras, questions that tasted like poison. Eleanor stepped forward before anyone else could speak. This bakery was built from pain, she said, voice trembling but clear. If someone wants to destroy it, let them try. I'll rebuild it again. The crowd applauded, a thunder of faith. Noah's smirk faltered. Then Alexander appeared beside her, steady and calm. You want a story, he told the press. Here it is. The man who lost everything found his heart in a bakery. Noah's jaw tightened. You'll regret this night. Alexander smiled. No. You will. He handed over a folder. Those debts you're waiving? I bought them. You own nothing now. For a second, Noah froze, fury flickering behind his eyes, then turned and stormed out. Into the rain, swallowed by the city that no longer listened to him. When the crowd dispersed, Eleanor turned to Alexander, tears glimmering. You didn't have to do that. I know, he said softly, but I couldn't let him rewrite our story. She smiled faintly. Our story doesn't need saving. Just truth. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small flower-stained box. Inside was a simple ring. I don't know where this ends, he said, voice low. But if it ends with you, I'm home. Her eyes filled. No speeches, no crowd, just quiet hearts finding peace after war. She nodded. He slipped the ring on her finger. Weeks later, the cafe reopened with a new sign. Clara's Promise. Named for the woman whose words had once healed a broken billionaire and a baker afraid to love again. Every morning, Eleanor still wrote her small notes for strangers. You matter. You're loved. And sometimes, Alexander sat in the corner. No longer a man haunted by loss, but one who had finally learned what wealth truly meant. Years later, their daughter stood behind the same counter, reading her mother's faded handwriting pinned to the wall. Love doesn't heal you instantly. It teaches you how to stay when the world burns and how to rebuild when it's ash. She smiled, looking out at the morning crowd, at the legacy her parents left behind. And above her, sunlight shimmered over gold letters that read, Clara's Promise. Where love became strength, and broken souls learned to rise again.